we'll be starting our next session with Arvind will be presenting. So Arvind will be presenting Agile journey in his organization, Societe Generale. He is an Agile transformation leader from Societe Generale. I would like to invite Arvind to provide presentation on his Agile journey.
All right, hello everybody. Welcome to this session. What I'm going to be talking about is Societe Generale's Agile journey that we've been doing for the last 4 years or so. So before I start the presentation, I would just like to get an idea of the audience, and many of you are Agile experts here. How many of you have been doing Agile for more than a year by just a show of hands? So quite a few experts here. And the rest, I believe, would have either started or would have been in the early stages of their Agile transformation journeys, right? Okay, so what I'm going to be presenting, some of the takeaways that I can offer you from this presentation is that guys who have done it, will find a lot of reinforcement in the things that they would have done in their organizations, and would feel that this worked for you and this did not work for you. While for the others who are new to Agile or are taking this Agile transformation journey, for those, there'll be a few takeaways that you can learn from and probably take back to your workplace and use some of these ideas, right? So I'll get started with this quote, which says that everybody thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing themselves, right? And what I'm going to be talking about is our attempt in SG, in Societe Generale, to change ourselves and how Agile helped in that entire journey. So, just to give you an overview of Societe Generale, by just again show of hands, how many people know about Societe Generale, what Societe Generale is? Okay, so maybe roughly 30-40%, not a lot of people know about Societe Generale. Nevertheless, it's a 150-year-old universal bank. We recently celebrated our 150th anniversary. And universal bank, when I say universal bank, what I mean is that we are present in all types of banking: corporate investment banking, private banking, retail banking, and securities, right? So all banking functions, we are present globally. Essentially a French bank, headquartered out of Paris. But we have presence in more than 70 countries, so a global presence there. We have a big offshore center here in Bangalore of roughly around 6,000 people, and that's where I come into picture. I am the IT COO. Amongst other responsibility, I have the responsibility of the Agile transformation of the offshore center, coordinating with our global offices, right? So that's a brief on what Societe Generale is. So why Agile? Why did we undertake this transformation? Why did we decide that we should be doing not something else but Agile, right? And as you would know, banks are notorious for not changing or adopting a lot of these practices towards the later stages of innovation. So they don't really are known for adopting technologies or be the first ones to adopt any new technologies or processes. But what I feel is that's not true in terms of Agile, at least. The Agile transformation that we did, I think, was in terms of at least the banks, we were one of the few early adopters of Agile, right? Now, coming back to the question on why Agile. So, you must have heard about this term called VUCA, which is commonly being used nowadays to describe the market dynamics or the world itself, right? What it means is that, I'm sorry, okay, some problem with the slide here. What VUCA means is that the world is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, right? So that's the common term that's being used to describe the market dynamics that's out there in the market. And even more so, that's the market scenario, even more so for the banks, post 2008 financial crisis. Things have changed for the banks, for all the banks. So apart from competing with their other banks for products and services, there are a lot of regulatory pressures that the banks are going through, and therefore we are in a situation where we don't only have to change our software or our offerings because of the regulatory pressures, but because of our market scenario as well. Now, who do you think are our competition for Societe Generale? Right? Some of the other banks, it would be an obvious answer, right? The banks that you have on the screen and many more. But not only. These banks are not only the competition for Societe Generale. There are other companies like Google, like Apple, like Facebook and Amazon, which are making a dent in the banking industry, right? So far, I don't think they have the banking licenses, but then you would have heard about Apple Pay, which got launched this year in the payment space, and you had Google Wallet earlier. So the point being that these innovative companies are making a dent in a lot of industries, including banking, right? So we need to be prepared from a banking side to protect our turf. These companies are giving us a run for our money, and therefore, these companies, which we call as digital disruptors, are changing the landscape. So we need to not only compete with our traditional competitors, but also with companies like this, right? So that's where, when we have this kind of a scenario, when the market is changing dynamically, the market is complex, new, and uncertain. You guys tell me. You guys are agile experts. What comes to rescue, or what does IT take as a solution? So agile, right? So agile is best applied in scenarios where your problem is uncertain, new, and complex, right? And that's where we found our answer roughly around 4 years back, and we started this whole journey of agile transformation. And the main theme being that we wanted, as an IT department, to have our business win, right? So that's the reason behind why we started agile. But not only that, that was the main reason why we wanted to take this agile transformation journey. But what we also found soon was that what agile gives us, it has a very, very people-centric approach. Very, very people-centric approach. So because of that, the employees, the people who are actually working on software development, are getting empowered. To not only take decisions, right, but being close to the products that are being delivered. So what that resulted in is an improved employee satisfaction, right? So to summarize, yes, we wanted our business to win, but also what we found was that agile, being a very, very people-centric methodology, it also helps in improving the employee satisfaction. Right. So that was the reason why we did agile. Now, did we apply agile blindly in all the projects that we had? The answer was no, right? Some of the guidelines that we found was this nice framework that Gartner proposes. It's called the PACE-led architecture. What essentially, without going into detail, what it means is that all the IT systems that you have can be broadly classified into 3 major areas: system of innovation, system of differentiation, and system of record. In layman terms, in simple terms, what that means is that there are few systems that you will always have, will not change for several months, or maybe an year. There are few systems which will require a change even within a few months, and there are few systems which are front-ending, which will require changes almost on a weekly basis, right? So this guideline, you can Google this framework. This will help you sort of classify your projects and identify the candidates for agile projects, right? So this guided us in using where can we use agile, which projects are better suited for using agile, right? So 2-3 years passed since we started our agile transformation, and gradually we started increasing the number of teams that were using agile. And after 2-3 years, we got into a scenario where more than 50% of our portfolio, the project portfolio, more than a majority of our projects started getting delivered through this agile software development method. And that's where we started putting a question on not only why agile, but now the question was why not agile, right? And agile became our de facto default standard. So any new project that was to be initiated, the first question was, can it be done through agile? And if the project manager or the people responsible for that project felt otherwise, if they felt that, no, this project has a good justification of not being done through Agile, then that project was given an exception. But otherwise, the question changed from why Agile to now why not Agile, right? So this was 2-3 years down after we started our Agile transformation. Okay, so at that point of time, when majority of our projects started getting delivered through the Agile way of working, we asked ourselves a question, is Scrum enough? Is Agile enough? Or do we need to do something more, right? So not to say that this can be replaced, but what can be complemented by, and what are the gaps in Scrum that we needed to look at. So at that point of time, when we asked this question, we found a certain gaps that were required to be fulfilled in order to get us to the next level of Agile maturity. And the gaps that we found was that Scrum is good as long as it's at a team level, so you can increase the number of Scrum teams that you have, but it may not be scalable. It may not be scalable. Yes, you have these frameworks that are available, SAFe, LESS, and DAT, but then we have not tried any of these frameworks till now. Probably we'll do that in the future, but that was one of the gaps that Scrum was not being scalable for us. And then what we found also was that if I just loosely talk about any transformation, there are 3 axes that any transformation needs to focus on, right? You guys are aware: process, people, and tools, right? So if I loosely map Agile to, say, process, not too many people will be comfortable calling Agile as a process, but let me do that for the sake of presentation, right? But what was missing is the people and the tools angle. So the question that we were asking ourselves is that, are the people who are working on these projects, the developers, the software, the testers, the BAs, are they equipped with the right set of practices? And are we promoting enough Agile engineering, right? Practices like test-driven development, behavioral-driven development, refactoring, continuous integration, all of those. Are we equipping our engineers with the right skill of practices, right set of practices and skills? The answer was no. Do they have enough tools to be more agile? Do they have enough automation in that what they do, right? So these were again gaps that we found that Scrum didn't talk about, but we had to focus on in order to move to the next level of Agile maturity. And one last thing what we also found was that by doing Scrum, we are still having the last mile problem. What I mean by that? What do I mean by that is, here if you see, what Scrum does is it brings the development team closer to the business, right? So the whole chain of business to the development team is working in a very, very agile mode. But what about the rest, right? What about the chain from development to production, right? Is that chain agile or not? Is that chain agile or not, right? And that was a gap that we found was there at that point of time, which we called as the last mile problem, right? So in a sense, what we started focusing on, that let's make the entire life cycle of software development agile and continuous. What that means is build continuously, integrate continuously, test continuously, deploy continuously, and monitor that piece of software continuously, right? So agility throughout the life cycle is what was missing, and then what we started a year back, and that is the initiative of the transformation. We changed from agile to what we call now as continuous delivery. So what that continuous delivery focuses on in very, very simple terms is 3 broad areas. So agile is still the foundation. You do your regular sprints, you do Scrum, so that remains your foundation, and a foundation has to be really solid. But on top of that, what we are talking about is craftsmanship, or what we call as agile engineering. Practices that I just talked about, meaning TDD, BDD, clean code, refactoring, etc. And on top of that, this whole chain of DevOps. How do we bring the development team closer to the operation teams, and how do we equip them with the right set of practices, namely infrastructure as code and virtualization through cloud, etc. Right? So that's what the phase that we are in from last 1 year or so. So the entire thing has now changed from just focusing on Agile to taking to the next level of Agile maturity, so what we call as continuous delivery. Right? So a couple of other things that I wanted to focus on, which are typically the critical success factor on any Agile transformation, and you will hear about these things in every survey that you come across, and every book probably that you read on Agile transformation. One being that you need to have a very solid leadership buy-in, right? And in that regard, our experience was that we were very lucky. Our global CIO, Carlos Goncalves is his name, and he was very, very passionate about this whole transformation. He didn't want to do it just because somebody else was doing it in the market, so he really believed in it. And I can only imagine that if we didn't have the leadership buy-in, how would the whole transformation would have been turned out to be. We would have probably been doing this transformation in few teams here and there, and not at an enterprise level. So leadership buy-in, very, very important factor. And for us, we were lucky to have that already in place. Another thing that that you will find as a critical success factor, a key ingredient on these Agile transformations, is the business involvement, right? It just can't be an IT transformation. Business, as you guys know, Agile requires a lot of business involvement, right? In all the ceremonies or all the practices that we do. And here on, initially it was an IT transformation, and we were a little apprehensive to take it to the business on how, on telling them what Agile is all about and what can it do for you. And when we eventually took this to the business and explained them on what Agile is all about, so the answer that we got was, okay, so what you're saying is that you're going to deliver software to me sooner. You probably will improve the quality of the software. And in return, you want a little more involvement from my side. In a sense, it's common sense, right? So what business told us is it's just common sense. Why don't you go and implement it? So all our apprehensions were put to rest, and business soon started getting involved in all our Agile transformation that we were doing at that point of time. Right? So at this point of time, you would feel that, okay, we got the leadership buy-in, yes? You got the business has understood the concepts, and they are on track and involved with us, right? So everything is okay, right? And everybody happily lived ever after. But that was not the case, right? This is the place where rubber meets the road. And the real proof of the pudding in this case is the implementation. So you can have the best of concepts, you can design everything, but when you roll it out to the teams, that's where you feel and face a lot of resistance. And this will be across, across the board, you do any Agile transformation, or for that matter, any transformation, change is hard, right? As human beings, we don't like change. So that's where our team of coaches came into picture, and some of you are sitting here right in the audience, as to how do we make that whole change management work for us. It's just not about creating ideas, but actual implementation is where we find resistances. And I'll not talk more deep into this, but tomorrow I think Shiva, who's one of our coaches, is going to talk about how did we go about coaching the teams, what was our approach. So tomorrow 12 o'clock is a session, and I encourage you to go through that session to get in some insights on how did we coach our teams. Excuse me. Right? So change, like I said, everybody feels that the concepts are good, but it's for the other guy, and it's not for me. It's for the next guy sitting next to me, right? So that's the point I was talking about. How did we go about changing people is a key element for our success. Also, having coaches is not a scalable model. You can't have coach for the entire organization, right? And that's where we were focusing on building a lot of second line expertise. Second line expertise, or what we would call as train the trainer programs. So we were training a lot of people in the organization who would work as our change agents and work with the different delivery teams to coach them, not as coaches, but as experts. Right? And this is where we are today. This is where we are today. When I talked about the entire journey, I took you through us asking what is Agile to begin with, and then we started asking, okay, why should we do Agile? And then we got into a situation from why agile to asking why not agile. And this is where we are right now. From why not agile, we are saying let's not do agile. Let's not do agile. You guys are aware of what I'm talking about. What I mean is let's not do agile, let's be agile. Let's be agile. This is the phase that we are in right now, where we are seeing that we've seen a lot of benefits. We've seen a lot of benefits by doing agile. But what are some of the practices that we are not doing from here on? What are the things that we can focus on to be more agile? And for the rest of the talk, I'm going to talk about certain things which we have not mastered. We have not mastered by any means, but there are things which are in progress for us. And those are the things that I'll take you through for the rest of the talk. So one being distributed teams, right? This becomes a challenge when you're talking about agility. When you have teams working across two geographies, not the best way to work in an agile mode, but that's inherently, you'll find a lot of teams working in this model before they move to an agile transformation. So the teams, because of how the work was offshored or outsourced, you'll find teams which are in two different locations, right? But when we talk about distributed teams, it's not only that the teams are in two different geographies or two different time zones. What is also implied, what you will come across practically, is that these two teams are speaking two different languages. These two teams have two different cultures. And these two teams more often have a separate set of objectives or incentives that they work on, right? So that is the piece that we are trying to address. And this finding is also reinforced by this State of Agile survey that comes out across every year, which talks about, it says that this year's survey says that the number of distributed teams has moved from 35% to 80%. And that trend is only going to increase. So we got to figure out a way to make distributed teams work in agile mode. And that's what we are working on right now to see how that can be done. And one of the things is to use a lot of technology. So nothing can replace or substitute a face-to-face interaction in terms of building the relationship. But the second best thing is to use a lot of technologies. So in our organization, we have a lot of, every person is given a webcam, video conferences. So as much as possible, we rely on technology. We also are investing into enterprise social networks. What I'm talking about are tools like Jive and Yammer, which help you collaborate across the organization in a better fashion, right? So those are the things that we're working on as far as communication and collaboration across locations in distributed teams is concerned. Next thing that we're working on is how do we organize our teams? Organize our teams. Historically, the teams were organized in a certain fashion, right? Is that the best method? And how do we take agility to the next level by reorganizing our teams is what we are again working on. So what we are doing is making our teams feature-based. So whoever it takes rather, in terms of role to deliver a feature, we bring them together and we co-locate them and have them work together. That's the model that we are trying in our organization, to make teams co-locate with each other and be more feature-based. So team organization, in summary, how do we organize teams differently and improve our agility is another factor, another area that we are working on. So Scrum by principle, right? Scrum, if you're using Scrum by principle, what you're essentially saying is your teams are self-organized. No manager is giving you or assigning you tasks, right? You are pulling tasks and you're assigning tasks within the team yourself. So that's what we're talking about.
Basically, what I wanted to ask was that self-organized teams means we are asking the team members to independently start taking up items, work independently.
Yes.
But in the same statement, we are saying the exact opposite of collective ownership. We are asking them again to work together as well as work independently.
No. So the collective ownership, what it means is that so if I do my stuff, right, I work on my backlog and I say these things were assigned to me and I am done with it.
Yeah.
I'm done with it, right? So that is not collective ownership. Collective ownership means that you've done your job, but you also help the others in the team to get stuff out, right? So it's not that you check on your box, but you are responsible for the code that's put in production. So you can't say, what typically happens is, in a traditional model is development does their work and says that, okay, it's the tester's job now. Tester finishes and says that it's the operations job now, right? So that is not collective ownership. Even if the tester is finding a problem, the developer helps him out or her out, and throughout the chain. So that's what I meant by collective ownership.
Exactly, I agree to that.
Yeah.
So basically, do you follow some methodology or some guidelines to make sure that, or do you have some kind of some guidelines that you follow to make sure that the team slowly starts coming into that collective ownership mode of working? Do you have some? How do you guide? Basically give the team the. We can't just directly ask them. No.
No, so that's where the coaching comes into picture, right? So we heavily invest on. We just don't prescribe certain things for the sake of it. And that's what I said. If you attend tomorrow's session on coaching, how did we do the entire change management business on bringing about that change, you'll get some more insights on what was our approach, right? Yeah, you're right. It cannot be just a person telling that this is the guideline and then run with it, right? All right. So culture. That's again one thing that we're working on. That so one thing when we talk about culture is the country culture, right? So you would imagine, right, the culture of France and India is as different as people say chalk and cheese, but here I'll say as different as an Indian chutney and a French cheese, right? So that is another aspect that we're working on in having a lot of cultural sensitization in both the location on what the other culture means, right? So that is a smaller problem to tackle, and we're trying to do, like I said, with some of the sensitization programs. But the bigger problem to handle is not the country culture, but the organizational culture, right? So this is again a highlight from this year's State of Agile survey. And ever since I've been seeing this survey, the number one barrier to any Agile adoption has always been what? The company culture, the organization culture, right? So that's where we are trying to make a small attempt to use the Schneider model that you would have seen, right? And the Schneider model basically, without going in detail, talks about 4 different types of culture. It says that no culture is good or bad. It's basically what are you trying to achieve, and is your culture aligned to those things, right? So what we are moving is from a control command culture, which has traditionally been there, to a more collaborative culture, a culture of trust, a culture of saying that it's okay to make mistakes, a culture of learning, right? So making it more collaborative, and therefore it will be more conducive to working in an agile environment. So we are also running a lot of sessions because the whole culture change starts from the leadership. So we're running a lot of sessions, or these are all things that we are trying to do, and we're in a very, very nascent stage on having the leadership transform into a host leader rather than a hero kind of a leader. And Scrum talks about the servant leadership model, and this is somewhere in between. And we are talking also giving a lot of conducting a lot of boot camps for our leaders, so that this whole agile thing does not remain a theory for them. They get their hands dirty, and they get to experience in these workshops of what's expected out of them when we are making this cultural shift. Right. So all in all, right, you would do this whole transformation, you would reach a certain level of maturity, you would go to a next level, so on and so forth. What is very, very important is that there's one thing to reach a certain level of agile maturity, but the other thing is how do you sustain? And that's where we are also feeling a challenge, that it's all right to do this transformation and do it for a number of years, that how do we make it second nature to us, and how do we make it a way of life? And as you would have heard, agile is fragile. So it's you reach a certain level of agility, but it's very, very easy to lose that, and the sustainability of the agility is really, really tough, right? So those are the things that we are trying to work towards. And yeah, there are certain things I would probably skip, but this is a cartoon that I would conclude with, and I use this in almost all my presentations that I do within the organization also, because I feel this really sums up, if you're trying to do any transformation, especially agile transformation, you will see a lot of resistances that, some of which I talked about here. And you have to be really, really committed to the transformation and just not involved. So here's a cartoon which sort of summarizes this. A pig and chicken cartoon. So the chicken goes to the pig and says, let's open a restaurant. And the pig says, what will be the name of that restaurant? And the chicken says, let's call it ham and eggs. And the thing is that in that kind of model, the pig will have to sacrifice more than the chicken, right? So you really need to be committed to the transformation and just not touch it superficially and just be involved, right? So yeah, that's what I had in my presentation. So merci, as my French colleagues say, and thank you for being here. Thanks for listening, and have a great weekend. Thank you.